Are we live?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Good morning and welcome to the thesis defense of Mariángeles Reymundi Anguita, Carmel. Okay, so welcome to those who are joining us on the live stream, and welcome to our committee, Professors Alejandro Álvarez and David Auerbach. And I will leave it with Mariángeles to introduce her project.
Thank you, Jane, for your introduction, and good morning. Just making sure that all of you can hear me okay. Please say aye. Okay, amazing. I'm going to be sharing my screen. Let me know as soon as you can see it.
I see it.
Okay, awesome. Well, as Jane said, my thesis is titled Over Skin and Paper, Excerpts of Womanhood. It's a translation of the first 8 essays of the essay collection Sobre, piel, papel by Mayra Santos Febres. It's a translation from Spanish into English, and my name is Mariángeles Reymundi. First of all, I want to thank all of the members of my committee, of course, Professor Álvarez, Professor Auerbach, and of course, Jane for being my thesis advisor. And just, I value your expertise and all of the comments that you will eventually provide to me. So I'm excited to start. Oh, I went too far ahead, sorry. Okay, there we go. So very briefly about the source text, as mentioned before, it's titled Sobre, piel, papel. It's an essay collection by Puerto Rican author and writer Mayra Santos Febres. It was first published in 2005. It has had 3 editions published so far. The first, of course, 2005, the second edition in 2011, and the third and last edition, as far as we know, in 2014. That is the edition that I used for my translation. The collection is divided into 3 sections: labia, papel, piel, and papel. In total, there are 27 essays, 8 in labia, 8 in piel, and 11 in papel. The collection is ever-ranging. It has press articles, op-eds, lectures she gave, academic writings. It almost has it all. And it has also a range of registers. There's many that are formal, some are more informal, some even seem kind of like just ramblings, almost like she kind of like a stream of consciousness of her, but she's still such a talented writer that they're very well crafted. The first section, labia, consists of 8 essays that touch on femininity, womanhood, motherhood, grief, feminism, familial love, and kind of how these all interconnect and intersect. Since that is a section that I chose to translate, that's why the title of my thesis is Excerpts on Womanhood, because I did not translate the entire section, of course. So as mentioned, oh, I keep doing that, I'm sorry. There we go. The 8 essays that I translated were Confesiones de una mujer Lucía, Virginidad virtual, Sobre cómo hacerse mujer, Memorias del Alzheimer, Regresando de la pérdida, Por el amor de una mujer, y voy a comprarme un amor, y Más mujer que nadie. Más mujer que nadie was divided into 3 parts, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And for the purposes of my thesis and just to comply with the word limit, the 12,000 word limit, I did not translate Más mujer que nadie completely. I only did up until the first part, so just an FYI. And of course, there wouldn't be a text to translate without the author. This is Mayra Santos Febres, is not likely one of the greatest Puerto Rican writers of our time, contemporary times. She was born in Carolina, Puerto Rico in 1966. She completed a bachelor's degree in Hispanic Studies from the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras, and she has a master's and PhD from Cornell University. She has received many awards, among them the Letras de Oro in 1994 for her short story collection, Pez de Vidrio. And this is something that Mayra, I think, has kind of excelled at, and she is at kind of the forefront of developing and cultivating and nurturing new writers. So she founded Puerto Rico's biggest literary festival, the Festival de la Palabra, and she is currently a professor at her alma mater, the University of Puerto Rico, where she gives classes and workshops on writing, Hispanic studies, which is her main focus. And that is where I got to meet her and became a student. So it actually leads us into why I chose to translate the text. Like I said, I was a student of Mayra Santos Febres during my undergrad years. I took 2 workshops from her. One was a poetry writing workshop, and the other was a short story workshop. And they were incredible. I got to familiarize myself with her writing style, her writing process, and I got to meet many of my peers, many of whom are published, self-published writers now. So that's what I mean when I say that Mayra is kind of at the forefront of cultivating and generating this new generation of writers. If at any point I lag or you can't understand me, please let me know, just for my own purposes. Okay, and that eventually, once I started translating, leads us to my translation process. Of course, I began my translation just as I was taught always by all my professors, to identify my audience. I identified my target audience as college-educated U.S. English speakers, primarily women, ages 20 to 60. The reason that I identified this as my target audience, I believe that Mayra Santos Febres' writing, and specifically the topics and subjects that she touches in this collection, are kind of, you have to be looking for them in a translation. I don't think it's a text that you would just encounter out in the wild. I believe you would be looking for similar things or adjacent authors and encounter it. So for that reason, I believe that I infer that the people would be college educated. Since she focuses so much on the women experience and womanhood, that's why I think it would be a primarily female audience. And when selecting the age demographic, I considered the ages of people currently in university and those who have continued to grow with the author throughout the years. So perhaps there are many readers who have already read other translations of Mayra Santos Febres and have continued to grow in age with the author. So I consider that in my identification of the audience. And of course, every translation has its challenges. I think, and Jane can definitely confirm, that her voice, her very distinctive voice, was the crux of us. It was very, very difficult. She is an incredible writer, and that also means that it's very hard to translate her and just to keep her essence in the text. It's obviously one of the reasons her writing transcends and has an impact on the reader. She, like I said before, she used various different ranges and registers. I'm sorry. She used various different registers, which was difficult to then, you had an essay that was a little bit more formal, and then write the next essay, it was a very personal reflection, and the register changed very drastically. So other challenges that I encountered were just hard to preserve her sentence structure and her cadence. She has a very particular rhythm to her writing. Even when she's writing at her most formal register, it still reads very almost musically, like she writes how she speaks. I also found various syntactical and typographic errors that I had to address. And alongside that, there were facts, details, and quotes in the essays and footnotes that she provides. Additionally, there was a couple of ambiguous meanings and just outdated terms that I also had to address in my translation. So here's an overview of the solutions that I came up with the help of Jane. We tried to maintain as much as possible her metaphors and her use of repetition, alliteration, and parallel structure to preserve her voice. She writes very lengthy sentences filled with dramatic words and many punctuation marks. So we tried to keep those in the text as much as possible. Sometimes, like I said, she writes very lengthy sentences, and sometimes in English, the structure is has to be shorter. It's not very common that English has very long sentences. In fact, one of the biggest things that you don't want to do in English is have a run-on sentence. So that was very important, that even when we had to shorten her sentences, that they still flowed with the same cadence that she had. We corrected the syntactical and typographic errors of the source text. I researched the author's cited text and edited the quotations when needed. I included translators notes, just little footnotes that is me speaking to the reader, for those who don't know, to notify the reader about additional or inconsistent information should be in the text. I relied on context and logic when faced with the ambiguous meanings, and I updated the outdated terms and phrases. Now I'm gonna give examples of how I did those. Right away, in the first essay, Confesiones de una Mujer Lucía, she has an example of alliteration. She says in the 14th page, de repente el macho proveedor de tragos y servicios no tiene más remedio que convertirse en pana, pareja y payaso con la mujer Lucía. So we see the alliteration there in pana, pareja y payaso. There's the use of the pa sound. And although it probably wouldn't have been, it's really nothing that kind of affects the translation anyway. We thought that it was important just to have that little pizzazz that she adds in her writing. So my translation was, suddenly the man who provides drinks and tears. Ooh, hold on. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Suddenly, the man who buys drinks and provides services has no choice but to become a pal, partner, and playmate to the bold woman. So we see the pal, partner, and playmate. Payaso and playmate wouldn't usually be direct translations, maybe like a joker or more literal clown. But again, wanted to maintain the alliteration, so pal, partner, and playmate was the decision that I stuck with. I also preserved Santos Febres' parallel structure and repetition. This is an example in Memorias of Alzheimer's, which is the fourth essay, and perhaps the most personal of them all, of the bunch that I translated. She details the harrowing experience of her mother's mental decline with Alzheimer's disease. So it's a very personal essay. I would think the one that has the most lengthy sentences in her work. There are many just long examples of how exhausted she was, and I believe that she used it to represent kind of her exhaustion and just the repetition of the days. So we can see it here. She writes, me llamaba a cualquier hora llorando, susurrando que alguien se había metido en la casa, que le habían robado la cartera, sentía ruidos en el patio. And then my translation was, she would call me in tears at all hours of the night, whispering that someone had broken into her house, that someone had stolen her purse, or that she heard sounds coming from the backyard. So here I included that in the last clause, which was missing in the source text. So she says, susurrando que alguien se había metido en la casa, que le habían robado la cartera, sentía ruidos en el patio. She doesn't include a que before sentía, so I added it just to kind of also make it correct in my translation, but to still have that sense of urgency and repetition that she included, and of course to maintain parallel structure, which is very important in both Spanish and English. I also corrected syntactical and typographic errors. Here are some examples of the errors that I encountered. The first one is in Confesiones de una Mujer Lucía, once again, the first essay. She writes, algunas hasta llegan al extremo de sudar. Eso sí, les interesa más estar vivas que mantenerse decentemente sentada en su mesita de esquina. When I first read this sentence, I don't think I kind of registered the comma or el sí de afirmación. I kind of read it as a conditional, so like, eso sí les interesa estar más vivas que mantenerse decentemente sentada en su mesita de esquina. And then it was when I looked closer at it that I noticed that it wasn't written that way. And I became curious because since I knew that this was the third edition, and in the preface of the book, she says that she edited some of it. I was curious to see what she changed, so I found a digitized version of the first edition, and I got to see if there were changes and what she updated. And in the first edition, that sentence is a conditional. So it's, eso sí les interesa estar más vivas que mantenerse decentemente sentadas en su mesita de esquina. That sentence made more sense within the context of the essay and of just the paragraph in general. So in my translation, I used the conditional. Some even go to the and sweat, but only if they're more about being alive than staying decently seated in the corner. So that's an example of kind of I believe it's a typo, a typographic error. And then another typographic error comes in the last essay, which I think this one surprised me a bit because she repeats it a lot, is the misspelling of Sartre Bartman in Más Mujer que Nadie. She talks about her a lot, and she calls her Sat G. In my research, I did not find any instances in which Sartre Bartman is ever called Sat G. If anything, sometimes her name is separated, so sometimes it is Sartre, but never Sat G. So I believe that was a typographic error, and she mentions it a lot. So I included the proper spelling of the name, and I included the reference, of course, of where I found that was her name. Another, in this case, I think it was it's a typographic error that resulted in a syntactical error. It's in the first essay again, Confesiones de una Mujer Lucía. She says, la que pregunta por qué están bosteando chamaquitos en la placita San José, ese es un problema social, es parte de la desintegración moral del país. She here is referring to what I called the bold woman, the Mujer Lucía. So that ese es un problema social. It's not it's not going with the gender of la que pregunta por qué están bosteando chamaquito en la plaza de San José. So I believe it was a typo, but it ended up being a word agreement error, which is a syntactical error. And in my translation, I just translated it as if she had said ella instead of ese. So the one who questions why they are busting kids in the San Jose Square instead of catching the big shot crook down the block. She is a social problem and part of the country's moral collapse. Okay, and some additional errors and just kind of inconsistencies that I found, as mentioned before, were kind of the details that she provided, sometimes of her references. In the fourth footnote of Virginidad Virtual, which was one of the academic essays, she mentions an essay by José Joaquín Blanco, Ojos que da pánico soñar, and says that it is a part of the collection Un Chavo Bien Helado. However, in my research, I found this to be incorrect. That essay was actually never included in that collection. Instead, it was first published in 1979 in the supplement Sábado from the newspaper Uno Más Uno. And then in my research, I found that the writer, Blanco, did eventually included in a collection, but it was not Un Chavo Bien Helado, it was Función de Medianoche. So in the target text, in my translation, I substituted Santos Febres' reference of Un Chavo Bien Helado with Función de Medianoche, as it was the most accessible source for the reader to find if they want to read that reference that Mayra Santos Febres includes in her essay. And now another kind of method and tool that I used for my translation was the use of translators notes, since there were some mistakes that I just had to address and let the reader know. So for example, here is not a mistake, but just I used a foreignism of vedetes in Virginidad Virtual. She's talking about kind of how the vedetismo of the 1920s Mexico, and so I found that vedetismo could be a star system, and I still included vedetes in its foreignism and its foreign word format. And I included a footnote with a translator's note that provided a definition of the term for the readers of the target text. So vedetes, very roughly, is a Mexican Gallicism that very roughly means showgirl. So another instance where I used translator's notes is in Más Mujer que Nadie. She includes 2 block quotes from a short story of The Smallest Woman in the World by Clarice Lispector. And this story has been translated in English before, so there was no need for me to give a translation of something that has already been translated. And it was already translated by Katarina Dodson in a collection that they published in 2015. So in the instance of my translation where those 2 block quotes were meant to be, I included the translation of Katarina Dodson. And of course, I can't take credit for that, so I included a translator's note, just letting the reader know that that translation was not mine and that it was Katarina Dodson. I gave the proper credit. And then in the essay, when she's talking about Sarji, she is talking about how they did not return her remains to her homeland, that she's still stuck in the museum where she was exhibited. However, in my research, I found that in 2001, they actually did return her remains to South Africa. Nelson Mandela actually had insisted that they bring her home, and the date on the essay is 2003. So by then, Mayra Santos Febres should have known that they were returned, but it's unclear why she did not add that to her essay. Maybe it was written before, who knows? But I did include a translator's note, letting the reader know that the remains were returned, because I believe it was an important fact that they should know. There were also a couple of updated terms. One example in Sobre cómo hacerse mujer, when referencing gay men, she says preferencia sexual. Now, we of course know just in now that it is better to use sexual orientation. Preferencia sexual gives kind of the connotation that it's a choice, or something like that, but that is not accurate. So I updated it in my translation to sexual orientation. And lastly, the ambiguous meaning that I encountered in the source text came in como en la pérdida, in the essay. And she's talking about how people kind of get stuck overanalyzing and thinking about their problems. And she uses, o sea que no pasa nada. When I first read that sentence, I initially thought that she was talking about kind of like the inaction of it all. Nothing happens. However, when she repeats it in the next sentence, it has a very different connotation. It can be interpreted very different. It's kind of like a self-soothing phrase, o sea que no pasa nada, no pasa nada. Nothing's wrong, kind of a self-deception type of phrase. And I found it very unlikely that she would include the same phrase 3 times, because she does repeat it, and have maybe like different meanings. So what I did in my translation, and I am open to have a different opinion is that I just included the self kind of soothing phrase in both instances. So instead of the first one being nothing happens and the other nothing is wrong, then both of them were nothing's wrong, it's okay. And yeah, those were mostly the challenges that I faced. Of course, the overarching one was definitely just keeping her voice, trying to make it palatable and readable, but at the same time, not dumb it down, because that's not what Santos Febres was doing in the source text. She's very particular in the words that she uses and just, again, the rhythm and the cadence that she has in her writing. And so, yeah, of course, translating this text wasn't hard. It wasn't easy, but I think that I don't regret choosing it. Alongside with Jane, I think that I got to be a better translator while I was translating this text, and I had a lot of fun with it. I got to kind of polish my researching skills. I had to be creative in finding solutions. And overall, I know that this text, when it gets later in the future, who knows, that it's an important text for someone to read. I think even if it's almost been 20 years since it was first published, it reads very current and it's very relevant, some of the things that she writes about. So translating it now, I think, would give a very just complete and nuanced reflection of Puerto Rican relationships, of women and motherhood and other racial themes that Santos Febres discusses in the rest of the collection. So I think it's a very important text to have to be available for everybody, for other language speaking countries and just people. And so, yeah, I don't regret choosing it. I had a lot of fun, and I felt myself getting to be a better translator and using all of the tools I had in my arsenal from other professors and classes that I took in the PGT in the past. So yeah, thank you for your attention. That was kind of a very brief summary of my preface and my translation experience with Mayra Santos Febres, Sobre, piel y papel. I will stop sharing now.
Thank you,
Okay, can you still hear
Mariángeles.
me?
Yes. I mean, okay, you can hear me, right? Yes. Is there a problem? All right. Thank you for that overview of your project. There's so much more that could have been said, but I appreciate that. That will give an idea to those who are watching online of what sort of a project this was. So now let's move on to the section in which your committee will give you their comments and their advice. And we'll ask Dr. David Auerbach if you'll please go first.
Wasn't I told to?
Yes.
Do I have a choice? I don't think I have a choice in this matter. First of all, Mariángeles, thank you for inviting me to this committee. And thank you for giving me this chance to read some works by Mayra Santos Febres, which I haven't read before. No, I've read her before, but I haven't read this collection.
Mm-hmm.
That's not shocking, is it? I don't think it's shocking, but I really did appreciate it. And in general, I'd like to congratulate you. In general, I think you did an excellent job with your thesis as a whole. And it reads very smoothly. And I do have some points I want to bring up, but I think in general, it's an excellent thesis. Now, you know, there with me in my classes, you know, whenever I say to any student, "Oh, you've done a really good job," they were always waiting for the but. And so
I remember that.
um, these are not, I don't mean it on that level. I mean that there are some points I think that need to be discussed. And can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I get some like freezing up from Jane and also Mariángeles, not you, Alejo, but I just want to make sure everything is okay. Now, I'm going to go through a few things. I don't really want to read through everything, but I think that there are some important issues. And, you know, at first when I was reading this, I was like, well, you know, there are no problems here. There are really no problems. But then there are some problems. Number one, minor, mostly very minor. Number one, and this is my own shtick, so you'll excuse me, but I'm referred to sometimes as the paragraph prince, and I think that paragraphs, you know, formatting, presentation, those are all important things for professional translators. And what you did was acceptable. However, I'd like to see it nicer. And when you have indented paragraphs, there should be no additional space between paragraphs. That's the most important thing. There should be no, and unfortunately, Word defaults to extra space between paragraphs. So you have to reset Word so that you get rid of that. It's really super easy to do you know, you just do Control A, you know, block the whole thing and adjust the paragraph
Or
style.
styles. Or formatted with styles too.
Yeah. And then the other thing too, Mariángeles, you haven't heard me mention this in my classes numerous times, but it's also a major shtick. And that is the initial paragraph of any book, article, section, essay, anything, should not be indented. And it should not be indented because we know it's the first paragraph. Why would you want to do that? It's overkill. It's overkill. And there's nothing that is said specifically in style guides about this. However, I found a note from the Chicago Manual of Style where they say, yes, we agree with this, but why Chicago? Why don't you actually publish something about it? The thing is, Mariángeles, if you open up any book in English, 94.7% of the time, you're going to see the very first paragraph flush left, no indent. It's the first paragraph. Okay, anyway, that's a really minor point. It has nothing to do with substance. It's about presentation. And it's also something that you should learn going forward as a translator so that other people, other editors don't have to correct you on it. Okay, now, getting into some other things. The footnotes, I was a little bit confused about the style in the footnotes with the last name, comma, first name. Is that really MLA style? And I'm getting this MLA style because I see MLA in your bibliography, so I'm assuming that you're using MLA style. Is that
Yes,
really?
I am using MLA.
Okay. I just don't, you know, when in footnotes, it's usually just first name, last name. Now, try to find MLA telling you something about that, because MLA does not want you to use footnotes, punto. They want you to just use in-text references. So, you know, so they're being very coy and they won't really tell you anything because they don't want you to use them. But, you know, I have nothing against footnotes. I kind of like footnotes when they're necessary. I don't like too many of them, but they serve a purpose. Alejo, do you have something to say about that?
No. It's a practice in local publishing houses that instead of using the shorter parentheses reference format, they still use the footnote. And I think it's that they just not update. I think and Callejon does it with all the other academic books, because I've read a lot of Callejon's books because of my own dissertation. I think it's regarding them. I think it's a matter of saving space. So not to add too many pages at the end. Again, you could have chosen, which I did. I'm not using footnotes for reference, for bibliographical references, because I hate stopping, coming down to see just for the reference. It really irritates me to stop and just to say, okay, fine. But again, her choice of not changing that is valid. I mean, if she decided to keep the footnote, that's your choice. So
yeah,
and to reinforce your point, if you're gonna do that, do it with the correct format, which is your point. So
and that's my point. And look, it's not like the text was overflowing with footnotes.
This part, but the rest of the book, oh, but believe me, it's
okay. That's kind of the ancien regime of UPR academic style.
I hate it.
Okay. Anyway, that's something that should be fixed. Now, footnote numbers also should be placed after periods or commas. You often do this, but sometimes you don't. Okay. Now, I'm going to get into things that are more important. Register. And register tone and style. You were very cautious. You were very, very cautious. I think sometimes you were timid. I think sometimes you really didn't figure out what, and you had the whole thing about the C word. Okay. But there are other things too. And I'm going to get into some usage issues in a moment, but my first observation about your register is that for all of these essays, I don't really get the formal approach. For all of these essays, I don't get the formal approach. For me, contractions should be used throughout. But sometimes you go too far with the contractions. And there are certain contractions that are just, for me, beyond the pale. Like who've, should've, could've. Those I don't think really should be used, or they should be used sparingly, because that's more like totally informal street speech. And that's not what we're involved with here. We're talking about someone who's being confessional, someone who's, opening up to you. And so it's appropriate to say I'm instead of I am, or those kinds of things. But I think that the contractions should be used more judiciously and more often in some cases where it just seems a little bit too arch and formal. And I've marked up some things, as I said in your text. Black should be uppercased.
I agree. I agree with that one. Yeah.
Black should be uppercased, and it's, if you look at the New York Times, you can get a whole article about why they, chose to uppercase.
And also I asked her personally, and she said yes, she would prefer it to be uppercase in English. I mean, I know that for a fact.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Now that brings up another point. When you discuss the author, Mayra's role in the Centro de Afrodescendencia at UPR and the Cumbre Internacional de Afrodescendencia, I think should be mentioned. And in some ways, I get the impression that her identity as a Black woman is a little bit diminished, just as a general observation, because I think that this really works. This is a very important factor in more than one of these essays. So, I mean, of the essays that you chose. So I would include a little bit more about, you know, her importance, which is tremendous. It's tremendous in terms of Puerto Rico, in terms of advancing these themes. You know,
Sí, sí,
I
sí.
would
I agree completely.
Now, more on register and kind of style. A note on breaking up sentences. One of the things that I tell my students, especially when they're dealing with literary works or anything academic in nature, scholarly, is that don't imagine that English readers who are approaching these texts are little baby infants. Do not imagine that they have no brain. I know that, you know, the impression that a lot of people have about Americans is that they don't have brains. And look, we have everything to prove that right now. But you know, I would be very cautious when you break up sentences and always look at it as a challenge. And I'll tell you two things. Number one, the translators of Marcel Proust never would have thought in a million years to break up a sentence, because the whole point of his novel, with his endless novel, Remembrance of Things Past, is just having these endless sentences that go on for pages.
Or Pierre Bourdieu, for example, who has this gigantic sentences
and
in French.
There's also a contemporary Irish novelist by the name of Mike McCormick, who has written a novel, an entire novel that's pretty long. It's one sentence.
Yeah, Bolaño Nocturno de Chile.
Bolaño,
yeah.
also, yeah. So be very careful when you do that, because you could be slicing and dicing someone's skin. You know, you could be slicing and dicing someone's identity. Someone, you know, this is their voice. So just be careful about that. And I'm not going to get into it, because I think actually you did a really good job with the translation. Okay, now, Alejo, you were going to say something.
No, it doesn't bother. I see your point, and it's valid, but I don't agree entirely, because this is not fiction either. You know, Proust, Proust, Bolaño, those are works of fiction. These are not works of fiction. So I agree with you with the essence of your point, but maybe in this case she has more a little bit more leeway than in other genres.
Okay.
That's all I have to say. You know.
Then just Mariángeles, use that as a caution going forward.
See, but I do agree with the caution, though. Yeah.
Okay, now there are some usage issues, and most of these are minor, and some of them have to do with prepositions. But when it comes to titles, the minor can become the major. And the very title of your thesis, which is Sobre, piel y papel, should not be over. It should be on.
On. See, I had that in my list too. On my list, actually. On my list.
There's no way that it can be over.
Things are on paper. Sobre el papel they're written sobre el papel, on the paper also.
And on also means about. On also means about.
Yeah, which is a double play, ¿verdad? Esto está sobre el papel, pero también habla sobre la piel, about the skin. So I will leave on.
Exactly. On. Okay. There are a couple of other instances like that. And by myself a love, I wasn't convinced about. I think by myself love, by myself a lover, by myself some love. I wasn't convinced about by myself a love, but you know, that's another issue. Now, when I'm talking about usage, there are other things that come into play here, and also what I think were perhaps overly cautious choices. Confessions of a Bold Woman, to me, seems like a very very unbold approach. And I have a suggestion for you on that one. Confessions of a Badass Woman. I'm not sure, but I bold woman.
I think
I don't.
I went back and forth with bold a lot, but I think ultimately I just think of bold kind of like just standing out. I understand the badass approach for
Not
Lucia.
badass either. Mira, Luz, can I interrupt here? Estar lucido it's a Puerto Rican, jargon term. I don't know, word. It includes being bold, but it's more than being bold. It has to do with being cocky. It has a little bit to do with acting out, but not in a bad way. But it's more than being bold. and it touches badass too, because I like flaunt better than bold. Because she's flaunting. Ella está fronteándose. Estar lucido, cuando alguien está lucido, está siendo casi engreído, está haciendo como que quiere que todo el mundo lo vea, quiere llamar la atención con sus acciones, ¿no? Eso es estar lucido, ¿no? It's very hard because it's not acting out. Acting out is much more negative than estar lucido. Because you shine, it's hard. I don't know. It's really hard, but bold is not enough, which is the point he wants to make. So,
but
yeah.
I get your point on flaunt, because I was thinking show off.
Sí, algo así.
But I don't see how you're going to work flaunt into a title.
I know, but and show off is also negative.
Right.
Es que estar lucido,
but you know, if
positive and negative.
My point about badass is that if you do some research on like who's using this term, I mean, there's
positive
somebody
now, yeah. It's positive.
Yeah, it's very popular,
positive.
and it's seen as being positive, and it's seen. So I think it's something worth considering. But you look, I just felt that bold wasn't enough. But it's just an observation.
And then I like flaunt at the beginning, but flaunt is also too formal. I mean, Lucia is colloquial, and a flaunting woman is like a Victorian guy would say that, not a person today. So yeah. Anyway, it's a very tough choice. See.
And even up front, but something, Confessions of an Upfront Woman. I don't know. The thing is, to me, bold is not colloquial enough, and it's not strong enough. So those are my observations.
I agree with David on that one. Yeah.
Okay. Now, there are a couple of other usage issues. And I'll get to the one that that was also giving you some trouble, and that's the term loca. And the thing is that loca, is used so much in colloquial speech, and it's a word that really it's a transgressive word, and it's a word that is seen as a word of empowerment by the gay community in Puerto Rico, even though it was originally, a very disrespectful term. So it's something that's been turned around. And to have an equivalent for that, first of all, there's the question of can it be left in Spanish? Loca.
Eso es lo que te iba a sugerir.
Can it be left in Spanish?
Sí, yo creo que sí.
And then, yeah.
Because I did consider leaving it in Spanish, but obviously a person looking, I mean, unless I included a translator's note or like in the footnote, letting them know that that's kind of one of the definitions, because But then is it easily accessible for someone reading it in English to find that definition? Because
You know
the
what
dictionary is not.
I have a suggestion.
Okay.
Okay. You very craftily and very creatively insert an explanation of what it is into a sentence. And here I'll give you an equivalent in English, in the gay community, for example, of something that might be equivalent, and that would be fabulous fags. What you could do is, you could say, if you have the sentence, those locas, comma, those fabulous fags, comma.
Oh. I was concerned about locas left in Spanish just because English speakers know loco and they know it means crazy, and that they would just see it as crazy rather than get it with a full impact.
That's why I said if you
Exactly.
insert something that explains what it is, and this is done all the time by
Sure.
translators, if you very craftily
It's called
insert
compensation. It's called compensation, or you can actually do an explicitation. Just explain it in a position or something like that. You can just leave it. Porque viene de estar loca, como dice David, era un insulto, ¿no? Los hombres homosexuales muy abiertamente así flamboyant estaban locas, ¿no? And out of a verb it became a noun, just the loca.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And then it became a transgressive, a liberating term.
Sí, it was appropriated by the community.
Yes. So, but I mean, the thing is that fabulousness is certainly, a word that is used in the gay community by, in a similar sense, and fabulous fag. If you put those two together, I think you get pretty much what the essence is in terms of how it registers within the community. Okay, so that's a suggestion anyway. Because I think that you were very cautious in how you dealt with that. Now, okay, I'm not going to go on too much further, but there are some things that, just seem to me incorrect in a way. For example, in your preface, you talk about the collection houses essays. I have never heard of a collection of stories collection housing essay. Gathers together, brings together, presents. There are many other things that could be used, but not houses. Also, on page 8 of your preface, you refer to adjacent authors, and I have no idea what adjacent authors are.
I guess what I meant was more like related authors, or just kind of.
That's what it should be. Okay, related authors, comparable authors, similar authors, but not adjacent, because that would mean someone who's standing next to, I don't, or located in the next building. Okay, now, most of the other things are very minor, except for one other thing that I'm going to bring up, and I just like to discuss this because it's an issue. Para mí es un issue. And that is the use and abuse and overuse of the word topic
instead of subject.
And when to use topic, when to not use topic, when to avoid topic, but the thing is that for me, to this very day, and it could be just a stupid prejudice that I have, but it rings in my ears. It rings in my ears as if a primary school teacher is telling us, okay, class, what topic are we going to deal with today? And I think you have other choices. You use it 13 times at least in your preface. And I think when it comes to especially literary things that are of a literary nature, things that are of a universal nature, I think that you should embrace the word theme. I think you can use other ways around that, but just bear in mind that this word, for some reason, also I hear it constantly in my classes, and it's always like echoing that primary school teacher. Okay, class, what topic are we going to deal with today? And I would just issue, focus, point, theme,
I think it has to do with the language of English teachers in Puerto Rico, David. I remember literary classes saying, hey, what's the main topic of this novel? I remember,
topic. What is it? I mean, a novel has a topic?
Dude, I'm not kidding. I remember, and she's laughing because it happened to her too. Every time you discuss a short story, a novel, a poem, what's the main topic of this work?
Topic.
It drills into your head, and that's why she's using it. She's just repeating, because I would use it too. We're repeating what we were told to use in high school. Yeah. That's it. That's just it.
I mean, you can take the escalator up to theme, and then you can take another escalator after 2 thematic elements.
Yeah, but I know. I learned that. The topic. I learned that with you.
You can even go to the top floor and do motifs and leitmotifs.
But sometimes even trope, if it's more specialized,
Trope, yes. Or even topoi.
Well, if you're going to go fancy, yeah, sure, topoi. Yeah.
In any case, anything that you use 13 times probably should be.
Yes.
Exactly.
Suggestions, okay?
Yeah, these are suggestions. And a couple of other things then that aren't, backyard is one word. Llorens, it's llorens.
Okay, in what situation is backyard one word? Because backyard as a noun is 2 words. Backyard as an adjective is 1 word. Like backseat driver.
No. Jane,
look it up in
Merriam-Webster. Look it up in Merriam-Webster.
They are now mentioning it because it's become, people have decided, I saw it in the dictionary as 1 word, so it must be 1 word, so that the usage is increasing. I'm still fighting it. But
why are you fighting it?
Because I think there's a difference between a noun and an adjective.
Well, of course there is, but language changes, and but the thing is that it's established as, and also I would look in the New York Times, I would look in other places, but backyard speaking contemporaneously,
in the backyard,
contemporarily.
I even pronounce them differently. If it's 1 word, I say the backyard, and I say backyard furniture. But when I say backyard, I stress the yard, and then I don't do that consciously. I don't do that as a part of a banner in my battle. But I just automatically pronounce them differently when it's an adjective. So anyway, I told that to Mariángeles, so put that one on me.
Okay, I put it on you.
Right.
Llorens Torres it has the accent actually on the E. Llorens.
On the E. Llorens. It's a Catalan.
Yes.
Origin.
Catalan. So there are some minor spelling and punctuation errors that I've noted. Centuries should be spelled out. You do that usually, but not always. Melancholy is preferable to melancholic. Interest in, not interest on. And el macho, which you mentioned in your presentation, I think is a little bit more colloquial than man. I think maybe you could say guy, at least. I'm not sure. so that's all I have to say. That's all I have to
Sorry,
say.
could you repeat the last one? I didn't hear it very well. The macho about.
Yeah, where you had an excerpt where you mentioned el macho, and then you with the payaso and
Yeah.
That's a very colloquial excerpt, and you use the man, and I think guy at least should be something else.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
because el macho como el tipo, but also it's you know, I guess, you know, there are other aspects to it too, el macho, but anyway, think about it colloquially, a little bit more colloquially. That's it for now, but I've as I said, I'll send you my marked up copy you know, after the defense, and if you have any questions, please ask me. Okay, that's it.
Okay, thank you. I want to mention, I did try to not indent the first paragraph of each essay. I'm just curious. I know there are margins because of the thesis manual, how it was supposed to be formatted. So I'm not sure if maybe my copy was different, like the one that I sent you didn't have them, but
yeah, but in your preface as well, you know, the very beginning, you
oh, okay, you mean in the preface. Okay, yeah, I for sure had it in mind during the translation part, but I definitely didn't do it in the preface.
Use it forever, because otherwise you're going to have an editor who's going to do it for you and get very pissed off about it.
Okay, I was just confused because I thought I had done it in the essays, but I will change it in the preface.
And also, you brought it up, but the thesis manual is ancient. It's ancient, and it also refers to the theses as if they were to be bound, printed and bound. So the margins that you have in the translation section expand, and they should just be regular margins, so just 1 inch on all sides.
Okay.
So, you know,
I just went, you know, kind of careful with it since it was the manual that was there, but I can change it.
Okay, yeah, it'll look better. Okay, and that's it. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from Mariángeles or?
At least for me, no. Thank you so much. I will definitely keep. Like I wrote it down, and I will be making the adjustments.
Okay, I wrote down my notes too, and I only read from my notes, so I'll send you my notes.
Okay, so I guess it's my turn.
Yes, I'm sorry.
I agree with David on congratulating you on an excellent work. I mean, this is not an easy text to do. It is public information. Mayra Santos Febres is my dearest friend. I also met her as a student. Wait.
Yeah, we've lost
Give me
your
a second.
sound.
So yeah, sometimes. What's this? Give me a second. Is this me? Wait, this is me.
What happened? You're
going?
okay.
We can see you fine.
No. I'm so no. Okay. No, give me a second. My computer started. Yeah. Sorry. Something went on in my computer. Started playing a podcast, and I'm hearing it on my earplugs. And so like, who's talking? It's your own computer. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay. I met her as a student also, and I proudly worked at the Festival de la Palabra for 8 years. So, and I ended up being her right-hand man at the festival. So yeah. And but I do agree with David that you need to put a little something regarding not only the Cumbre de Afrodescendencia, which is an event she runs every year, but she also helped getting the funding for the minor degree in African Afrodescendant studies. You know, so because that's what she did, and she's there now in Generales. You know, so I agree with that. And I agree with you. The main challenge translating Mayra, it's her style, definitely her style. in many ways, and I think you're spot on. She changes register all it may. Sometimes within a text, she changes register.
Yes.
So yeah, so that's her style. It works. A lot of subordination, which in Spanish is okay. English doesn't like it that much. So it's a matter of juggling when to cut a sentence, when to leave it, as long as the original. It's really a hard game. I mean, it's tough, but again, you have shown the rigor needed to topple this problems. So I think you did a fine job in general. I commend you. Yo la amo. I amo a Mayra, but she's very bad on names. Actually, it's a subject of endless jokes between me and her. I always say that she has onomastic amnesia. She will never remember a name correctly. She'll probably find you on the street and say, "Hi, Marima, how you doing?" And of course, she meant Mariángeles. She's always forgetting people's names. So you see it in Sar G, you see it. But it's not the only one. If you read the whole book, she quotes a lot of African and Indian authors who she misspelled. So, and see, David.
I'm sorry. I just want to insert something else about Sarche. Mariángeles, obviously you did research on her. Can you hear me?
Sí.
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Obviously, you did research on Sarche, but the thing is that that's a diminutive, and it's not really a respectful form. So I think that maybe at some point or another you could refer to her as Sarah Bartman. So
I did wanted to keep what Mayra intended, but I also I did find that she was called Sarah. But I didn't know, I mean, I know that it was the diminutive, but they didn't really know what her real African name was, right? So
yeah, but it's the name that you would give a child.
Yeah,
and
okay.
So I don't think it's really, I think that you should give her a formal name at some point, or at least mention that.
Okay.
In your sorry for interrupting you, Alejo.
It's okay. But in the other chapters in piel y papel, which are harder because they're more formal, they're more academic in general. This section is the most colloquial of them all. But she misspells name. Like 15 names, either a person, an author, or a work. So I commend you because. Remember, I was taught this way, and we taught you this way. Always question always fact check all your all the names. Always fact check, because this is an author, and of course, in Puerto Rico, there's a crisis there's an editorial crisis in the sense that the market is not big enough to have a lot of professional proofreaders, a lot of professional editors. It's really a small market, and it has no money to create, this to work on this thoroughly. So her mistakes sometimes are reproduced by the publishing houses, and us as translators have to be even more careful than normal regarding names, regarding facts, because you have to expect that even though it's been edited and proofread, there might be. Because there's like a little call to es la autora, no la toquen. Listen, I have to, because it's my job. And as we tell you, the mistakes by the original are on the author. The mistakes on the translation are on you. That's why the way I was taught. That's the way we teach you. And I think you shown that to us, and I commend you on that. Because you really saved her. Authors are not perfect, and authors are not. When they write this, they're not thinking about how exactly have to spell a name. I mean, it is important to them, but at the moment of writing, doing the manuscript, it's not the first thing they have in mind. That's why there are proofreaders and editors, to do this. But and translators have to never trust those and always, do our own research. So you did that, and I commend you on that. I also, regarding Clarice Lispector, and I use Clarice because she was Brazilian and she's Clarice, even though she's from Ukrainian descent. If you go to Brazil and you say Clarice, they're gonna correct you. It's Clarice, the inspector. I also used the dots in translation, so that was good on your part. You did well on that. And of course, there's a mistake in the Portuguese into Spanish translation, right? That you pointed that out, the ingravida. Ingravida means without gravity, lack of gravity in Spanish. But in Portuguese, or gravido, and in Spanish too, it means pregnant. So you got that right. So yeah, so it's good on you to see that even though she's quoting a book, a translation into Spanish, the translation has a mistake. So it's good. I commend you on that, on realizing that there's a mistake on the translation. Again, pretty much, David said pretty much the things, the styles and usage issues. I think David covered that quite well, but I don't agree when you talk about Juan Helpí's, when she's quoting Juan Helpí, that she said it's a syntactic error about the este. You remember that one? I don't think that's a mistake. I think the este, she's talking about him, about the author. Let me.
Okay.
Isn't it ese? Oh, I'm sorry.
So you have it on your preface. Let me see. Let me take a quick find here. And
Yeah,
I
I
don't
have it. It's on
Sí, déjame.
page 20.
Gracias.
Yeah.
Voy para allá ahora. La página 20 del prefacio de tu traducción.
Del prefacio.
Ok, voy para allá ahora. Because I remember, I have it in my head. I don't have it on the text. Oh, here it is. Sí, esa es la tesis de Juan Helpí sobre el amor urbano. Este es una ruta. Okay, here este is el amor urbano. Okay. No habla de la tesis. Okay, she's a thesis on city love, and then city love is the way to explain the what she's saying is, it's the way love occurs in city spaces. That's the key to all these boleros and baladas. That's what she's saying. She's not talking about the tesis, the él. She's talking about urban love. Okay. So I don't think it's as a mistake. I think that the este refers to the last male thing there, which is the urban, amor urbano. In the other one, you got right. The other, I actually, the C word was excellent. I mean, you hit that on the head. So I commend you on that. And also I commend you on the retaining the alliteration between the P's, So I really, that didn't even, I did a different one than yours, but I like yours better actually. So yeah.
Can we know what you did?
I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
I see, and I'm also on an NDA, so I cannot.
Okay.
Sorry.
Alejo, you translated this?
I've been commissioned last year to translate this. I have a first version, and we're going to start editing in the summer. So yeah. So
you're going to use Mariángeles' work?
Some things, see, for example, I commend you on the Oronda, because the Orondo, it's a Puerto Rican colloquialism, caminó por ahí Oronda, va por ahí Orondo, that's Puerto Rican Spanish. And the way you solved it, like she sails, it's exactly that. She's like sailing, she's floating in the air. I mean, the image is spot on. I really have to commend you on that one, because it's, first of all, identifying Orondo as, this is not the normal use of Orondo. If you look it up, it means plump, thick, like healthy, thick. But that's not, our use va por ahí orondo. It's like, yeah, she's cocky, you know, she's like looking everybody over her shoulder, you know. She's just, I like the way you translated that. Yes, and now here I'm gonna go with curious stuff because that has not necessarily to do with your work. How would you have translated labia? Because I know that was the top, the section, yeah, because it's labia.
Because yeah, I left it as is, but yeah, I was curious because definitely she touches on sexuality, so it could be the sexual, like the organ, the part of the vagina, or it can be like definitely like la labia, the colloquial,
which is what
I kind of understand she means. But
that's another thing
honestly,
too.
I wouldn't know. I think it would just have to again read everything from okay, from the start to finish to know. But it also, I don't know, because it's since she also has piel, that is also kind of like a very bodily thing. So that also kind of pushes me into it being part of the like
Just
labia.
I still haven't decided if it's labia or a gift of the gab is what I heard. You know, like a person who can, you know, be so, you know, such a seducer, and you know, with words they can convince you about anything.
Have you asked her or
no? Because I have that. But it's pending. In the summer we're gonna meet. She always. I have translated her before, but not literary work. I have translated essays for museums or for conference and stuff like that. But she always likes to see the final version before you know, she doesn't have to. I do not respect, you know, it doesn't necessarily work that way in the real world, but she always asks to see the final version just in case she has to add any comments on. And of course, it's the first source for translator. You have the author there, so it's offering her views. So yeah, she always.
The fact that she in I believe it's in No sobre cómo hacerse mujer, the one that's more woman than anyone else, that she talks about like how como que lo sostiene en el vientre, como she talks about like about a birth there. So again, it kind of also pushes me into kind of it being a bodily thing. I don't know.
I'm gonna ask her. I'm gonna ask her if she meant. Of course, she's gonna say I meant both. And like, girl, I can't do both. In English, it's polysemic. English doesn't necessarily, you know, I have to choose.
Yeah. And for the
can you? I'm sorry. What was the second meaning of that? That you mentioned?
Labia is also like gift of the gab. Like.
Can I have? I have a suggestion.
What you used to like maybe like enamor someone, or like not even enamor, you can put your labia into anyone.
What we call that, like we say now, he or she has a lot of game. Has a lot of game. That's labia.
But David said he had a suggestion, so.
Which could at least maybe reference both things. Loose lips.
Yeah.
I like it, and I like the alliteration, the loose lip.
Right, the alliteration is good too.
Yeah. I like it. And it's weird,
especially because it's such a confessional type of section, like David said.
And it's the only section where the colloquial essays dominate in quantity, because the other ones are largely academic, mostly academic. So yeah. And the other sections are even tougher because in piel, skin, she also quotes a lot of poems. You have to go and get them and translate. They have no translations. So you have to translate poems. It's really tough. Believe me, it gets even worse, even tougher. And I see. So. Yeah, so let me see if I have something else on what I marked that's different from what David said. No, I don't think so. That's pretty much it. you got the bolero thing right. Bolero, it has no translation. The vedette thing, I also, you don't, the dead, the island of Iris Chacon.
Yeah.
Right, right. We
everybody-
talked about Iris Chacon
Sí,
quite a
o sea,
bit.
Did you agree with the vedetismo star system? Because that one, vedette wasn't as hard. It was vedetismo.
I will
kind of.
not. I will not translate vedetismo. I did not translate vedetismo. Actually,
Okay.
I left it and wrote a note.
I agree with what you did there, Mariángeles. I think that was very good.
It's like a vedette is like a star showgirl. It's not a showgirl. It's the star.
It's the
a
star, right.
Star showgirl. So, and that doesn't. You can say it in English, but it doesn't really. You lose all the cultural phenomenon. Of women like not only Iris Chacon. Many before her, Tongolele, even Betty Boop. Could be the first vedette.
When I came to Puerto Rico in 1972, and very shortly after that, if not then, Iris Chacon was very much the big thing, and I was still been very basically learning Spanish and learning Puerto Rican Spanish, and I came across vedette in articles, and I had to over time figure it out from context because I could never find anybody who could define it for me.
Sí.
But
Otra que viene después, María Ángeles, es corillo. Oh, Lord. I translated as posse because she's talking about the hip hop scene in the 90s. In the 90s. Because it's a different. No, but crew is the people who go on stage, your musicians, your DJ.
yeah.
That's the
Okay,
crew.
right.
Well, your corillos, your friends, your closest friends. And I remember in the 90s they were using posse, the Kid Power posse. So I use posse.
That's good.
Only because it's referring to the 90s. Maybe if it's today, maybe it's entourage today. It's something that you use now. But so it's this.
I think now if they use a lot of like my gang, which definitely has a different connotation, but I've heard
Posse is even more current, I think.
See, posse it's especially because it's.
I think posse is still being used.
See, and this book is very
more
important.
current. That's what I said.
Regarding Sargi, I'm pretty sure because I asked her. I'm pretty sure when she wrote, even though it was published in 2003, this essay was written in the 90s. So she did not know about the move. And I think.
Okay, that makes sense.
See, so, but I think you have to change your footnote because your footnote says like it says, but you said like she should have known or no, she didn't know. The author was not aware of
I think
the
I
change.
put that it was unclear if she knew or didn't.
No, but
so I just put that she didn't.
But I tell you, I'm pretty sure she did not. This book is important on several because of the themes it approaches. There's no hay tanto. There's few literature on the AIDS pandemic. There's not a lot of work that still remains today, and it's important because a lot of gender terminology that we have today, it's a result. It's inherited from the AIDS pandemic. Some of them are even discriminatory. Like, there's always a gay gene, but there's not a straight gene. Straight is the default. It's straight. We are biologically straight, but if you're homosexual, that's a different gene. That's not true. There's not such a thing as a standard sexuality gene that people. So all these discussions come from the AIDS pandemic, and I think she did a very good job in reflecting upon the pandemic, and I think most of her ideas, even though as you say the terminology has changed because it has evolved, it's 30 years have passed. A lot of her ideas are still valid, or at least are in discussion today. So that's what I like about it. And that's what she, and I asked her, but that's what she wants about this book. I mean, she wants to see if her ideas of that time are still in the discussion today, and they are. The labia part, the female sexuality part, the race part. I mean, these. I don't know if you guys know, but the section piel got her a lot of trouble because she was the first one to denounce a lot of things in academia regarding race that were taboo in the 90s. You cannot talk about that stuff here in Puerto Rico. She opened that box and she got a lot of enemies because of her essays. So, and then even more in papel, because in papel she's talking about. Well, she ended up being right. She saw 20 years ago the death of the Latin American boom and the emergence of and criticism about the Latin American identity, a literary identity. What is Latin America now? Is it a market? Is it an identity? What the hell is it? She was questioning that 25 years ago, and now everybody said, oh, of course, sure, but it wasn't that clear, though. It wasn't that clear in the moment. So her three branches, I could say, are very important today, and this is a very important book in that sense. And my final thought is, it's unfortunate that I got the gig, but you could have done a great job if this would have fallen to your hands. So that's what I have to say in that sense. So yeah, congratulations, you did a very good job. Of course, when I saw your name, I expected a very good job. My bar was high, and you nailed that. So congratulations.
Thank you so much, Alejo. Thank you. And thank you, David, for your comments as well. I've learned a lot just from being here. So, and I know that your classes were very imperative in just everything that I did in the translation. So thank you. Thank you so much for all of it, from all of you. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're ready to have our discussion. So Barbara. Okay, welcome back. We have come to the point of informing Mariángeles of what your grade is, and I'm happy to be able to tell you that we've decided to award you a grade of sobresaliente. So congratulations on your excellent work, and thank you very much to the professors.
There are very tough discussions amongst ourselves.
Yeah. I hope we didn't make you nervous. We did get a little off topic in our discussion, so we're talking about a few other things other than your work. We had no questions.
We don't get to see each other too much, so we kind of use this space to mingle. So. Yeah.
Oh yes. Thank you. Yeah, I was beginning to worry. I was like, I thought they said it as a joke.
No, estábamos chismeando.
I told you a long time ago when we talked about the defense that it would be a conversation a conversation about translation among friends.
Sí.
So, and that includes you. So congratulations. We're very happy for you. Excellent work.
Sí. Y te veo en el choli.
And I don't know what my life's going to be like without Mariángeles being my student.
Oh.
So
yeah, stay in touch.
This is my last year of undergrad. So yeah, I will. Thank you so much. Yeah, actually, I just wanted to take this moment to say, to thank Jane. I got to know the PGT through her because I took the course that she gives in undergrad on my last year, and I loved it so much. And when I knew that I wanted to kind of pursue graduate studies, I immediately applied for the PGT, and she was one of my letters of recommendation. And then she's my thesis advisor now. So thank you so much, Jane. And thank you for your time, your expertise, and all of your comments. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
See, for those listening, that course is very important. That's also my path to the PGC was that Jane was not the professor at that time.
No.
I'm a little bit older, but it made me decide. It made me decide between literature and translation, and that was the course I said, no, I want to translate. I like it more than literature itself. So yeah. So for those who are listening, if you have doubts or you're interested, there's this undergrad translation course by the English department. Then it's been a fountain of very good students and professionals through the years. So consider it in the future. Yeah.
I second it.
Well, then